Deborah. Hey, Kim.
Hi, well, good morning, everyone. Well, we want to thank you for joining us for today's Tree Strategy Implementation Group, or TSIG forum. And today we're excited to have our guest, Matt Stahman, who is the Director of Regulatory for Resource Environmental Solutions, or RES. And for today's format, we're going to do very similar to our previous formats, a 12-minute video, and it talks about all the work that RES is doing at mitigation sites all around our region, which includes a lot of large-scale tree planting that, as we all know, is very beneficial. And so the video is arranged. First, you'll see several text boxes that you're reading the text, the information, and then it goes in and transitions into footage where we have interviews at the mitigation sites. And so then following that video, we'll have a live Q&A session where you can pop your questions into the Q&A boxes. And then when we do the video, don't forget to turn up your volume. And did I leave anything else out? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think that all sounds great.
Okay,
thanks. Looking forward to it.
So Matt and I are going to turn the video on now. And I hope everyone enjoys, and we'll see you in about 12 minutes.
Restoring the boat arc mitigation sites involves planting literally millions of trees. We're planting those trees in areas that are former cotton fields, former agricultural sites, so we're concerned about the long-term survival of those trees, but the bigger issue is getting that many trees in the ground really, really fast.
We have a process of, when we're going to plant a tree, one, the site has to be prepped, whether that's prescribed burning, disking, spraying. It is going to be clean for the planting crew to come in and plant. We planted more trees in less amount of time than we ever have. And that, goes to, the crews on the ground. Yeah, we had some of the largest labor crews we've ever had to use. We planted about 500,000 more trees than we had initially planned because they were able to go in and finish so much so fast.
Having a site like River by such large in scale and just vast acreage, you actually do pick up some production because you're running some very long lines of rows of planting the trees. It really helps with the crew's ability to get a lot of work done in a little bit of time. Being able to work in such fields that are 3,000 acres in size versus a 300-acre field, which may be a typical site that we're working in.
So the trees that we plant typically spend the first year of their life just putting roots down into the ground, growing straight down, not really growing up. The second and third years is when they really start to put on the growth above ground. We're really excited about the survival rates that we're getting already out here on the boat arc mitigation sites, and we're really looking forward to the next winter's planting season.
Working out at Riverby, we've definitely had to kind of scale up in our operations. You know, we're running 16 crew members when we actually are doing our planting and our mixing. Out here we've been running about 36. Had to increase the, almost double the size of our mixing operations. We had to get some new custom mixing tables built that make it a little bit easier to get all these trees mixed and at a higher production rate. We receive our trees from the nurseries that grow out our bare roots, and they come in 200, usually 200 trees per bag of the individual species. So. And kind of at the beginning of the planting season, we spend almost a full week mixing trees so that we have enough trees mixed and ready in our refrigerated truck so that we can begin planting and not have to stop and start and stop and start. The mixing, it allows for a better planting scheme. You don't have just one row of one single species all the way down. You mix them up and you get better chances of survival and across the entire site. We like to mix as many species as we can, as are available in nurseries and are native to the site that we're working in. So all of our species mixes are handcrafted for the project areas and the sites that we're working in.
On the eastern border of Riverby Ranch is land that's been under conservation for decades. As part of the Federal Natural Resources Conservation Service's Wetland Reserve Program. The original Willow Branch ran through this conservation land, where it met up with Bodark Creek, just before that creek merges with the Red River. The last phase of the restoration was to reconnect this historic flow with the newly restored channel.
We found down in the Wetlands Reserve Program this remnant section of Willow Branch, and walking through it is still a pretty cool experience. It's like walking back in time on the ranch. The trees are all riparian trees. They're these massive black willow trees and massive cottonwood trees and all these trees that had grown up along that creek but are now just sitting there in the forest with no real water flowing through that channel anymore. There were even large, I found a large green ash tree down there. It's probably 24, 20, 30 inch diameter green ash tree that the beavers had completely girdled, one little bite at a time all the way around this tree, trying to get ready, I guess, to build dams down along this whole remnant creek. Now that we've got the hydrology restored into that remnant channel, and this is very early, so I haven't seen what all is going to happen yet when the water gets turned back on, but it's going to be really cool to see how that channel comes back to life.
For a century or more, the challenge at Riverby Ranch was to try to dry out this land that wanted to be wet, that literally thirsted for the waters of Willow Branch. Now, that land is planted with literally every kind of vegetation that we are restoring across the ranch to recreate forested wetlands, emergent wetlands. bottomland hardwood forest, native grasslands. Restoring the way water flows across the heart of the ranch helps ensure the success of the entire restoration. We're proud of the work the team has done on Willow Branch Creek and happy to know that future generations will witness its transformation back to its natural state for years to come. With Riverby Ranch being part of the Bodark Lake Mitigation Site, this landscape will be under permanent conservation. We'll be on hand to monitor the success of this stream restoration and the whole project for 20 years. After that, nature will be left to take its own course, unhindered and unfettered.
There was that final ching. Okay, that was oh, are we not quite finished? We have one more, folks, and then we'll be back. This one is a local example. Okay, that was great. Thank you, Matt. Oh my gosh, the work you all are doing is just fabulous. Yeah, that's really incredible, and I'm looking forward to. We've gotten some Q&A or some questions coming in a variety of different ways, which is fabulous. Let me say real quick a couple things. One is this is the 5th in the series of virtual forums that the Tree Strategy Implementation Group has been doing to help in furthering the Resilient Houston Plan's goal of 4.6 million trees by 2030. These videos supplement with a large-scale tree planting manual that is now available to download. You can find it on the Houston Wilderness website. Click on programs and 4.6 million trees, and you can see the manual as well as view all the other videos that have been done to date. And this video will also be available in the next few days to be able to view as well. And then the other thing I'll mention is that At the beginning of this video, there were some maps that showed that RES and others have got quite a few mitigation banks and stream mitigation bank projects in our region as well as other regions. And some of what you saw was actually in other regions of Texas. And I saw in Q&A that there's some request to have a little understanding, a little background on that, which I know you'll cover, Matt. But I just wanted to mention in the beginning, you saw some local mitigation. Then in the middle of the video, you saw some of the things taking place up toward the Dallas, North Texas area. And then at the end there, you saw again another regional one. So Matt, I'll let you kind of cover that part and then we'll open up for the other questions.
Very good. Yeah, Deborah, if you want me to start,
Sure.
just giving background on that first project that was highlighted there, the Boat Ark project.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, that question come in from Jim, so I'll answer that real quick, and it helps if you don't mind if I share my screen. I've got some
Absolutely
really quick couple of PowerPoint slides just to make it easier. So I'll throw that up there real quick. Jim, just so you know where this project is at, the Boat Ark Lake mitigation project is it's a large scale wetland and stream and other habitat mitigation project that was part of the Army Corps of Engineers permit requirements for development of the Boat Ark Lake reservoir up in Fannin County, Texas. So that's right up here on the Red River, only a short 6-hour drive from Houston, which I make like every other week. I'm not really good at that drive. Not too far outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, especially as that Metroplex has continued to expand over the last 20 years to the north and to the east, much like, not much different than the Houston Metroplex. That reservoir that they're building up there is to basically serve, it's going to serve, I forget how many communities, over 30 communities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or the Dallas area primarily, with a new 17,000 acre surface water reservoir and a freshwater pipeline that brings water back down to the North Texas Municipal Water District's mixing facilities there at Lavon Lake in Wiley, Texas. So major project, the first of its kind to be built in 30 years as far as the reservoir. Also a very unique mitigation project, because I don't know of any mitigation project, at least not a permittee responsible mitigation project with this, which this was, that's of the same scale as what this project has generated. Now you can see some of the stats on the lake there, and you can see some of the impacts from the footprint of the lake, several different habitat types, 17,000 acres of impact, and then hundreds of thousands of feet of stream impacts from that, from inundation of those bottoms there next to Bonham, Texas, which is where Boat Ark Lake is being built. But the mitigation is equally as stunning. We are, RES is the full service provider, turnkey for all of the mitigation work associated with the project. And that in and of itself is over 17,000 acres. You can see the different habitat types there. There's generally 7 different habitat types that we're working with there. And out of those 7, you've got 1, 2, 3 or so, 4 that require large scale tree restoration efforts. And that's what those videos were highlighting. We've been doing those efforts now for 3 years out at River by Ranch and the other 2 mitigation sites that are associated with the project. Not just that, but almost 70 miles of stream restoration and or enhancement work in that watershed associated with offsetting impacts from the reservoir. So it's a major project. Like I said, 3 different mitigation sites. The big one in the video that you saw was River by Ranch, which was a private land holding that was purchased by North Texas Municipal Water District in advance of their permit requirements from the Corps. They purchased that ranch about a decade before they got their permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, with the specific purpose of using it to offset their impacts, restoring it, enhancing it to offset impacts from the lake. And then there are a couple other mitigation areas. One at the upper end of the lake, a couple thousand acres of bottomland hardwood forested restoration, which is fantastic habitat, and that, especially in that part of the world. And then a few hundred acres of additional native grassland restoration as well. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of background about the place. When we got there, you know, the ranch was a working cattle and agricultural operation with all the appurtenances thereof. And then we basically adapted that whole that entire area, that entire operation to a massive ecological restoration project. So in a nutshell, I hope that answers your question. Happy to go into more detail as questions require.
That's great, Matt. We do have some other questions that I think relate to that project. One thing I wanted to ask real quick was, I know you said the uniqueness of the size, which it definitely is. I think it may be one of the biggest in the country in terms of the size of restoration. But in terms of the actual work you did on there, such as the restorative efforts related to reforestation and the native grasses and other aspects, is that typical of many of the mitigation bank projects that you do, that type style?
It is. That project sort of brought together a whole toolbox of techniques and restoration types that we do on all of our on many mitigation projects, and not just mitigation projects, but just ecological restoration projects in general, especially down here on the Gulf Coast. So the habitats that we worked on up there and are still working on: forested wetlands, emergent wetlands, scrub wetlands, native grassland restoration, upland forest restoration, riparian corridors, and streams are all components of various different projects that we worked on up and down the coast and nationwide, really.
That's great. So I know one question says great projects, which they are. For the stream meander restoration, what geotechnical work needed to be done for the new stream bed itself for the project to be successful?
That's a great project, a great question. I see. I'm following along with you there, Deborah. I've got that window up on my screen, my other screen. So I look at it. So Dave Hampton asked that question. First, let me caveat: I'm not an engineer, Dave. So don't expect a technical engineer's answer out of me. I'm a project manager, jack of all trades and master of none. But you asked about the geotechnical side. Yes, there's extensive geotech work that goes into soil borings and whatnot that go into knowing what we're going to get into before we lay down those restored stream channels. And there's a major design component when you go out in these areas that have been restored, especially 5 or 6 years later after these streams have been restored. If somebody didn't tell you what had happened there, what was going on, you might be able to figure that something, somebody had come in and stabilized the site, but you'd never appreciate the amount of engineering that goes into those sites. Moving water is the most erosive substance on the face of the planet. And if you don't engineer these restoration projects correctly, then of course they're prone to fail when water goes flowing through those stream channels. And so a lot of geotechnical work goes into it, understanding what those lower substrates of soils are, building up soil lifts and different layers of different types of materials, including woody materials that we harvest typically there on site. Sometimes there are harder materials like rock that are either in the channel themselves or maybe buried into the channel. Heck, at River by Ranch, we even used hay bales, square bales, and buried them in portions of the channel and sometimes on the meander bends on those channels, on the riffles of those channels, in order to ensure a level of stability, especially until vegetation had several years to get firmly established and rooted, particularly our woody vegetation that we want to grow, very, very, very well, and then hold down those outside meander bends and whatnot. So a lot of geotechnical work did go into it. Deborah, I think you're muted. Yep.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I only muted because there's a thunderstorm going on outside my window, and I didn't want to interrupt. So what I was saying is, Carolyn's also asked related to soil, which you mentioned. Did you find a need to provide soil amendments biology in any of the locations for revegetation?
Carolyn, that's an excellent question. And I can give you an even longer answer offline. Maybe we'll go to lunch and talk about it. But just long story short, the short answer is yes. That soil out there at that particular project site had been farmed and dissed and trampled by cattle for 150 years before we got there. And